Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week we have Laguna Seca for the first time in a very long time, and it's Group 3, so it's a lot of fun. There's a very clear meta, but I do have a special weapon to fight against it. Let's get into it. Your Anti-Meta car of the week is the RS1. The BRZ is head and shoulders above pretty much everything else. It's really light and nimble, so it handles incredibly well. It's really good on the tires, but I guess the one thing the RS1 has over it is power. Make no mistake, the BRZ really is much better than this car and pretty much everything else, but you can at least have a fighting chance when you use this car. I managed to get a 120.4, but this car is definitely capable of, at the very least, a 0.2. You'll notice that there's absolutely nothing except the BRZ under 120 flat, and this is probably the most dominant I've seen a single car in a very long time. I think if some of the people that chose to drive those other cars in the top 100 chose to drive the BRZ, it would just push all the others off the top 100. As you're first going over the crest and past the start-finish line, you want to hug the inside, then eventually move out to the outside. You're going to look for this white line, and right before you get to that white line, right about where those tire marks start, that's when you're going to hit the brakes. Turn in right before this next white line, getting down to second, and then first before the first of two apexes. And in fact, you definitely want to get closer to the apexes. You want to get right as close to the sausage curbs as you can without hitting them. Back up to second gear, and then get on that throttle as heavily as you can without sliding. If you turn too much here, or if you get on the throttle too abruptly, you will slide out, and you definitely want to avoid that. From here, aim for the 3 board so you can get a line on the left side of the track as early as possible. You're just going to curve your car in, not go to 100% brake, but right after the 2. When you're following those black lines, that's when you're going to start hitting the brakes. Immediately trail brake in. As you turn in, you're going to dip down to second gear, up to third gear, get as close to that sausage curb as you can, and then completely get on that throttle while you're still turning into the corner. Of course, you don't want to slide out here, and you don't want to touch the dirt. Staying on the curb, you're going to look for the 1 in the distance, and about a car length before that, you're going to start turning in very gently, then very gently add just a little bit of brakes, down to third gear, back up to fourth gear, and on that throttle, as close to or before the sausage curb as you possibly can. Continue steering in. Don't straighten out your wheel until you know that you've made it and you're cleared the dirt. For the next braking zone, I want to note that sometimes it makes it so the car doesn't stop efficiently if you brake all the way on the curb, so I like to brake before I get on the curb and then move onto it to complete the line that I'm trying to hit. Right before the 2 marker are some tire marks on the white line, and it's right before that you're going to hit the brakes. Turning in before the end of the red part of the curb, you want to get all of your deceleration all the way down to second gear done before you get to this sausage curb, up on the curb afterwards, and then back on the throttle. You can actually do it in third gear, but I felt like second gear was going to be better just for that specific line that I was taking. This might be a hot take, but the next corner, the one before the corkscrew, is actually the scariest corner on the track. Right at the 2, we're going to give it about 50% brake, turn in, and then you want to be entirely off the brake right before you get to the sausage curb. Add a little bit more steering, and then gently get back on that throttle to make sure you don't go all the way off. You have to get as close to the sausage as you can without touching it, and of course, if you are late whatsoever or if you're early, it's going to be a disaster. Up next is the infamous corkscrew. Right past the 4, you're going to see this marshal on the right, and right when you get to him, you're going to hit the brakes. Aiming to put your right tires on the very right part of the curb up here on the right, you're going to brake in a straight line past the crest and prepare to start turning in. Right before the 1 marker on the right, you're going to start turning in, dip down to first gear, and trail brake. You want to get your right tires on this curb right here, and then you're going to look for this tree in the distance. As soon as you clear the first apex, you should be back on the throttle in second gear, aiming for that tree in the distance. As you clear the crest, you can sneak a little bit of full throttle before then following the curb, getting a little bit off the throttle as you hit the curb, and then back on full throttle once you clear it, making sure that you don't slide out whatsoever. Continue steering to the right until you get underneath this bridge with the WeatherTech sign on it, and you want to change directions. Shortly after getting past that bridge, you're going to start turning in, then come off the throttle a little bit before adding just a tiny bit of brakes. You'll see that I actually turned in a little bit too late here. Once you clear the apex, you want to get fully back on the throttle. You can be in third or fourth gear. If you have enough momentum, fourth is probably faster. Move yourself to the left side of the track so you can aim for the curb, and right before the 2 marker, you want to hit the brakes. Down in third gear, you only want to use enough brakes to get your nose tucked in as close to that inside sausage as you can, and then back on the throttle as you pass that sausage. The banking does disappear on that curb, so if you're a little bit too far, it will suck you off into the sand. Move to the other side of the track looking for the 3 marker, and when the entirety of your car gets past it, that is when you're going to hit the brakes, and you're going to hit the brakes very hard. Brake all the way down to first gear and look for this little patch of gravel where it changes colors right past the dirt. That is when you want to start turning in. You've got a trail brake, but you got to stay heavily on the brakes until you're all the way up to it. Then back to second gear on that throttle heavily. If you get a little bit of rotation, it's probably not going to slow you down. In fact, it's probably going to be faster, but if you actually slide out, it's definitely going to be slower. From here, it's just a straight shot to the end, and don't forget that you can stay in 4th gear all the way to the end. The first thing I want to point out is that I completely missed the apex for the first 2 corners or 1 corner, depending on how you look at it. And the reason is because this car is very difficult to get to not understeer when you're trail braking. My issue is that I just kept too much brake pressure on for too long. For this right-hander, you want to treat it like one big curve. You don't want to brake in a straight line, then shift the weight again. You want to turn, shift the weight, and then use the brakes just to slow the car down just a little bit rather than trying to shift the weight multiple times. It's the same with that fast right-hander. This upcoming left-hander is really tricky. You actually want to slow down probably a lot more than your instincts are telling you. You got to slow down, then get heavily on that throttle right past the apex. Like I've been saying, this corner is actually the toughest one in the track. You have to be very, very inch perfect, and you have to do it incredibly fast, so the margin of error is incredibly, incredibly small. Using lots of visual cues in the distance will help you at the very beginning when it comes to learning the corkscrew, but eventually you're just going to memorize the shape of it, so you're going to instinctively know where the curving is beyond the crest, eventually. Before that last sweeping left-hander, you don't actually need to be nearly as far to the right as I was. That actually just wastes time. What's more important is that you just get as close to the apex as you can and you carry as much speed as you can as well. If you feel that you're braking at about the same place that I am, but you're sliding past the apex, you're probably either coming off the brakes too fast or you're turning in while carrying too much speed. You want to wait as long as you can to turn in there. So there's good news and bad news about the meta car this week. The bad news is where we'll start, and that is that the BRZ is so incredibly fast here that you're really not going to be able to beat it on pace. It's just going to have to be up to driver skill, and that's going to come down to consistency and just how much you work your time trial time and how much you really know the car. So, in the right hands, of course, you will be formidable against it, assuming that the same person that you're racing hasn't spent the same amount of time at the BRZ. But with all that said, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that is that the BRZ is so insanely difficult to drive that some of the world's best drivers are still struggling with it and are spinning out consistently in races. Our car this week, the RS1, is incredibly stable, and even when the tires get really bad, which will most likely happen, the car's still pretty stable. It doesn't really ever get too squirrely and scary. Another bit of good news is that there is some strategy involved. You do have to use both the medium and the hard compounds, which means that you can go for an undercut or an overcut if you so desire, though the window is pretty small because of the severe tire multiplier. The BRZ, on top of being very fast, I think I did mention this before, is really, really good on the tires. So it's going to have the advantage there as well. But like I've been saying, it's incredibly difficult to drive, and this car is incredibly stable, so a lot of times consistency is going to beat raw speed. I didn't actually check, but I suspect we have the custom slip-on, which means that the dirty air is not very severe, and the amount of slipstream benefit that you get is pretty high. So if you stay close to a BRZ that's in front of you, you might actually be able to stick with them because the RS1 does have better power. If you find yourself in front of a BRZ, it's actually going to be pretty tough for them to pass you. It's difficult to pass with a handling car in a situation where you've got a car that does have good acceleration and also more power, but of course, it's not going to be impossible. Like any of these daily races, you're of course going to come into situations where people are not going to be going quite as fast as you expect them to, so you've got to be ready for anything, no matter what kind of car they are, especially if you're doing what we do and we're racing from the back, which is why we found ourselves in this situation. That dilapidated taco guy slowed down much earlier than Ramster expected, and so Ramster accidentally hit him. He immediately gave the spot back, but dilapidated taco decided that he was just going to push me off anyways, because some people, when they get mad, just decide that they don't care about anyone else on track. Because Ramster hit him, and I actually think it's Taco's fault, he decided to take it out on me. Despite the fact that I was clearly next to him, he just tracked me out immediately and didn't even hesitate, didn't slow down whatsoever. Now, like I've been saying, it's pretty difficult to make passes with the BRZ. Because it's a handling car, it's all about momentum, and if you lose that momentum, since it doesn't have a lot of power, it's hard to get it back. When Taco got caught up with the other cars directly ahead, I knew that I had to just focus on my exits, get as much speed as I could, make sure that I didn't lose traction like he just did, and eventually an opportunity might arise, and just like that, it did immediately. Now, I'm not sure if he didn't expect me to go on the inside, or if he just wasn't interested in defending, but I was able to get all the way next to him, and as you can see, the car handles just well enough that I was able to get all the way in front of him before the apex, and that was that. With the super fast left-hander coming up, a lot of people are going to struggle with it, and a lot of people are going to be taking it a lot safer. So if you can really master it and carry a lot of speed through there, you can possibly pull off a move at the corkscrew.
Trying to pull off an outside pass is difficult because 1, you don't know who you can trust, and 2, you don't know who's going to be paying attention. I do think Paris Labrador saw me, but I also don't think he gave a damn about just driving straight through me, so I lifted off a little bit and decided I was just going to try to pull off another move in the future. Since I was able to get so close to him so easily, it shouldn't be an issue. Now, a lot of people go for a pass on this corner, but I think it's a much better idea to get as close as you can and then go for a really good setup on the exit. But of course, it doesn't matter if people who have hit you in the past decide to just drive straight through you like this dilapidated taco guy. You better believe that I remember that kind of thing. I will never forget when someone pulls off multiple moves on me like that. That's why, as I went for this dive, I didn't even care to make sure that he had enough room, because I knew he didn't care if I did. And it's that simple. I will track someone out if they track me out. And if you track me out and then run into me directly afterwards, I'm not going to be nice whatsoever. It's people like Dilapidated Taco that give this game a bad rep. People like him that make people not want to race online. If you're watching Taco, I really hope you take a look at how you drove today. And if you aren't Taco and you're seeing what he does and you're not seeing a problem with it, then you might want to ask yourself why you don't see a problem with it. Just because the game doesn't penalize it doesn't mean it's not wrong. The game does not have the kind of sophisticated software to be able to penalize certain situations like that. And even though the penalty system tries to work, it straight up doesn't. So a lot of times you just have to take the law into your own hands or just drive incredibly defensive and watch your rear view when it comes to people like that. Right here, we can see Paris Labrador do the exact same thing that I did, but I have enough experience here to know what was coming, and I was able to lift off the throttle and counter steer, saving myself from a very embarrassing spin. Now that I got in front of those guys, I had my sights set on podium, but One Clever Name had just a small penalty, and he was too far away for me to really take advantage of it. This is actually a really tough penalty spot because it kills all your momentum coming out of that corner, and you're probably not going quite fast enough to be able to defend against anyone who's right behind you. It ends up taking a lot more than just a half second off when you're serving a half-second penalty. Now, when I went into this corner, I don't think that One Clever was actually trying to block and move under braking. I think he was probably watching his rear view and trying to navigate the corner like normal. And as you can see, he's giving me a lot of space. He's not doing anything crazy. And when I do get next to him after this corner, he gives me space. So that kind of looked sketchy at the beginning, but I really don't think he was trying to be sketchy whatsoever. I've had really good races with One Clever Name for a very long time now. Now this right here was actually the turning point of the race. Mike had a run on me. He was actually ahead of me, and I knew that if he got in front of me, there was pretty much nothing I could do to pass him. Most likely, actually, I really didn't know because I hadn't had to really battle a really fast guy in a BRZ yet, but I was certain that if I didn't take the lead right there, I wasn't going to have any opportunity to maintain third place. Now, Mike actually just lifted because I did have a little bit more momentum going into that corner, and as you know, you don't want to go too wide in that corner. I would have given Mike space, but it would have slowed both of us down that people behind would have probably been able to pass both of us. So it was really smart of him just to let me have that position, and we both ended up getting to continue racing each other. Now, it was at this point that I started really sweating. Mike is a very smart guy. He's a shrewd driver. So if he thinks it's going to slow us down too much to battle, and he knows that I have good enough pace, then he'll probably just stick behind me and wait for the last opportunity to strike so that he can pass me close to the end and we don't lose any kind of other positions from anyone else behind. And it is really important that we do something like that because in fifth place, right behind Mike, is Fantasy, who is going incredibly fast today. This was actually a very exciting race from my perspective, but on a recap, it's actually pretty boring because it's just lap after lap of us being pretty much locked and try not to make mistakes. Jumping a lap ahead, as you can see, Mike is still glued to my butt. Jumping ahead one more time, Mike is so close still, he is virtually inside of me, and as I go in the pits, I realize he is not going into the pits. I'm not quite sure what the thought was, but it is pretty smart if you think that you've got better pace to go for an overcut. The only difference there is I'm going to be going onto a softer compound, so I'm probably going to be able to go a little bit faster than he can, even though he's going to be in the superior car. I find that most people are pitting on lap 7, but some people have been choosing to pit on lap 8, going for an overcut of sorts. And there is a bit of danger if you do pit on lap 7 that you could run into someone who has not yet gone to the pits. And that is actually exactly what happened with K-Bar, but luckily I didn't catch him until right before he went to the pits, so my lap wasn't hurt whatsoever. In fact, I might have been able to sneak a little bit of that slipstream right before the final corner, but it probably was just a negligible amount. Now, the pit exit here is really cool because you get to drive by the people that you're trying to over or undercut, and I did see that Mike had a very, very good lap when I was in the pits or when I was going on my out lap, and so I was still in danger from Mike, but I was also chasing down our friend WRX. WRX is not to be underestimated, but I did feel that since I was on the fastest lap right now, and I did have his slipstream, if I was able to stick with him, I might find an opportunity to pull off some kind of pass. With just 5 laps left, I didn't think I was going to be able to close the 3-second gap between myself and Fernandez, but I was holding out hope that I might be able to pull off a move on our buddy WRX. With WRX only 0.6 ahead and Mike 1.3 behind, I needed to make sure that I stayed as close to WRX as I could, used his slipstream as much as I could, and try to avoid letting Mike get into my slipstream for as long as I possibly could. The other main thing to think about with Mike going for the overcut is that he was going to have better tires than me, and not only that, he's in a car that handled the tires much better, so he was going to have a massive tire advantage when it came to the end of the race. Now, if you recall the beginning of this video, I did say that this car is absolutely on a knife edge. It's insanely difficult to drive, and even some of the best drivers in the world are having issues with it. So now it looked like the position I was trying to take was going to be the first position. And our buddy WRX, he was shaking his butt at me. I like to joke around, and whenever people say hi by shaking the butt of their car at me, I like to call him a pervert because it's just absolutely hilarious. And also, he's a pervert. Now, I don't know if he was just distracted because he was being a pervert or because he's just absolutely a sweetheart, but he left me room on the inside and I was able to get all the way in front of him because of the extra power that I had with this car. With all that in mind, my goal is to put as much distance between myself and him as possible so that when Mike gets in front of him, or if Mike can get in front of him, then hopefully I'd be far enough ahead that he wouldn't be able to get in front of me. But as soon as I was thinking about that, Mike got all the way in front of WRX on that very next corner. Not only that, Mike was now within striking distance, almost in slipstream range, and my tires were certainly going to go off probably 2 or 3 laps before his did. We did only have 4 laps left, but this car is pretty nasty on the tires compared to the BRZ. Actually, you know what? This car isn't even nasty on the tires. It's not great, but the BRZ is just so incredibly good, it makes every other car seem like they're pathetic when it comes to the tires. You can also see that the BRZ really shines in that last sector, and Mike has already cut out 2/10 from my lead. 1 lap ahead, and Mike is almost at the exact same distance that he was on the previous lap. 1 lap again, and Mike is 2/10 closer, definitely within striking range, and actually, if you look at the delta, temporarily 3/10 closer. The end of the penultimate lap, and Mike is just marginally closer yet again. It's about this time that I start really sweating, because if I can hold him off for just 1 more lap, then I could pull off a win from the back. If you look at my lap times on the right, after lap 11, my lap time started really dropping off. I think that's when I really hit the wall, but also I was certainly making a little bit of mistakes when it came to pushing this car. It's in situations like these where all you can do is hold on and just hope for the best. There's really nothing you can do when it comes to a very good driver in a superior car, but hope that you can pull off some kind of miracle and just keep up your pace despite the fact that your tires are dying and you're at a very big disadvantage. And I want to take this time to actually shout out Mike. If you've been following my channel for a while, you realize that Mike and I actually had a bit of a falling out probably about a year ago now. And Mike and I have known each other for maybe 8 years. We raced against each other. We've been friends for a long time. And when we had a little bit of an argument with each other, it was actually really terrible on my end. And I think that I mistreated him. He deserves a lot better. And in fact, I really hope you'll actually check out his channel if you don't watch him. You probably do watch him if you watch me. Mike is actually a very good guy. He's a great guy. He's a very fast driver. And I really appreciate him. So Mike, if you're listening, I love you, brother. And I appreciate what you're doing. And I hope you forgive me for how much I've mistreated you in the past. And I do appreciate this. If you'll see this, Mike made 1 last attempt to get really close, but it wasn't quite enough. With 1 more lap, Mike would have absolutely had that. With just a little bit of difference, Mike would have had that win. And in fact, he definitely deserved to win today because he was driving extremely fast, but that car he was driving was an absolute menace. I'm really glad that I had this race, and I had a few other, I actually had 1 other win and a few other podiums. This car is absolutely a fantastic choice for the anti-meta car. I hope you give it a try, and please let me know what you think of it.
As always, thank you very much for watching my video. If you like what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, I'm going to be leaving you with a look at my current members, and perhaps afterwards, there's something secret and special. Actually, I'm just going to tell you right now, the very best thing I've ever done was at Laguna Seca. And so I'm just going to put it at the end of this video after the thank you. It was initially going to be a surprise, but now I've ruined the surprise. So just watch it. This is called a corkscrew. This corner is also called the corkscrew. My name is TyrannoCyrusRex, also known as Rexy. This car is also called Rexy. So that means this is Rexy doing a corkscrew at the corkscrew while Rexy is on the corkscrew.